So we know tire pressure affects your ride, how comfortable you are, how fast you are, how efficient you are, but how exactly do you know? I'm out here with the man, the myth, the legend, Travis from Silca, to try to sort that out with 2 different sets of tires here on the Unbound course. We're using the Chung Method. Travis, I must admit, I'm a skeptic of the Chung Method. The idea is to ascertain what the rolling resistance is from measuring what we can.
Yeah.
What are we doing today? What is the methodology?
Yeah, so the Chung Method is also known as virtual elevation. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna ride up and down the couple little hills here on Divide Road over and over again. And we're gonna change the pressure each time. And then we're gonna go back and compare the files. We're basically gonna make the actual elevation that we're riding match up with the virtual elevation from the file. Once we do that, then we'll have a CRR number. So you can test rolling resistance, you can test aerodynamics. You know, this time we're gonna hold the same position so that the only variable that we're changing is the CRR, the rolling resistance number, and be able to tell what the fastest pressure is at different points on the course. So we're starting out at Divide Road.
This leads to my skeptical bit,
Yeah.
in that it's hard for riders, maybe not for you, since you'll be maybe on here, but it's hard to eliminate all the variables, whether that's like a little bit of a gust of wind or taking a slightly different line. I've tried to do outdoor testing for road tires, trying to tease out differences that can be measured in a lab, and I've just struck out outside. When there are big differences, I can find that outside. So for instance, I was coming down a hill in Boulder the other day on this bike with these 48s set at like, you know, low 20s, and I was top speed was like 43 miles an hour. I've ridden this a ton on my road bikes, and you can get over 50 miles an hour. Like that's a huge delta. So I think when there's a big difference, you can tell a big difference. When there's a small difference, it's hard, I think, to tease out what is, you know, a difference in CRR and what is a difference in like body position or something like this. So that to say, we're starting this. I'm the skeptic. He's the professional. We are using Silca's tire calculator, which is a handy thing where you put in, I'll put a link down below, you know, you put in all the different parameters, your weight, your bike weight, your tire width, and then you can specify what type of surface you're riding on, because the answer to the question of what's the best is often, it depends, right? So like, are we riding on pavement?
How long is a piece of string?
How long is a piece of string? So we're gonna test 3 different pressures of the mini in the calculator. We're gonna do category 1 gravel, going back to the old great Neil Shirley 1 through 4 categories of gravel. We're gonna test a cobblestone pressure, which is kind of in the middle, and then a category 4, which is the chunkiest of the chunk. I've got 48 millimeter tires, the ENVE Hex. Travis is on Conti Race King.
2.2s.
2.2s.
Blow out to 55.
Beauty of lab testing is it's apples to apples. You can eliminate all the variables and just test one thing. Downside is it's not the outdoors, which is what you want to test. So that said, being outside, I'm trying to reduce as many factors as reasonably possible, like keeping the exact same position. I'm trying to average like 250 watts. What are you doing to try to
just trying to hold the same position, you know, making sure I'm not wiping sweat off and moving my arms around. That's going to be the thing that really affects it the most. And then trying to hold generally the same line. I mean, I think we're probably 1.5 miles or so stretch here, so you know, making sure we hit every rock the same every time is probably not going to happen, but generally the same line, and we'll get an average CRR of the run.
It's difficult to replicate the same exact line every single time. This is part of my skepticism with this. We just did 3 laps at category 1 pressure. Now we're going to drop to cobblestone pressure, repeat, and drop to category 4, repeat, and then we'll go to a couple of different surfaces. And
and what pressure are you running on the 48s?
It was 30.5 and 32, if my weak memory serves. And you are here?
I am at 23 front and rear.
Okay.
Trying to keep the same pressure just to see the differences.
Okay. So now we're going down to 26 and 27.5. Handily, this pump's got a nice little air pressure relief. So take it down to 26. on the nose. The rear down to 27.5, 26. Lap. $22.5. Don't hit Richard's camera. Don't hit the camera. High action, high drama. And lap 3. So we've done 3 pressures. 1, cobblestone, category 4. Now just for giggles, I'm gonna go stupid low. Off the charts, below the charts. Got 15 in the back, we'll do, call it lucky 13 up front. See how that looks and feels. Mushy, like roll a tire kind of mushy. Definitely too low. Okay, so we did 4 sets of testing. Yep. 1 cobblestone, 4, and then stupid low. You take it. We're not going to know the data until the data meister crunches it, but you have a gut feel.
Stupid low was stupid low. Yeah, no, I think at the high pressure I was at 23, and you could definitely tell that you were hitting all the little washboards, the little bumps. As it dropped down to 20, felt a little better. 17 was the category 4. It felt really good.
Yeah.
And then it pretty quickly felt like an anchor when you got below that. So.
Yeah.
We'll have to look and see, but.
Yeah, there's like CR numbers and lab efficiency, and there's also like what feels good in 2 ways, I think. Like I said, going down, like even if you're not losing watts of power because you're coasting, if you're getting beat up, like that takes a toll.
Yeah.
And doesn't feel nice, and you might end up braking more than you would if it's smoother.
Yeah.
And then pedaling, if something feels squishy, it's sort of like the little ching ching with the brakes.
Oh,
like
man.
it might not be a huge thing, but that at least gets in my little head. So. Yeah, for me, like that, the middle 2 pressures seemed like where I could be happy all day, just based on nothing but gut feel.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see what the numbers
right there
say.
with you.
So now next up, new location, pavement. Where are we going?
We'll have to pick a new spot. I don't know.
Now here in Eskridge, we're going to repeat the protocol, but on pavement. Most gravel races have a bit of pavement, and just for comparison's sake, we're going to see how those same pressures, category 1, cobblestones, category 4, and stupid low, treat us on pavement here in Eskridge, Kansas. One more. And how'd that feel, sir?
Silly. The Eskridge crit is over. So we got the pavement done.
I finished second in the 2-man crit. Couldn't even see him.
Same pressures, category 1 gravel, cobblestone, category 4 gravel, and then stupid low. So I was at 23 to 14. You were?
Starting at 32 in the rear was the highest, down to 13 in the front as the lowest. And yeah, the bottom 2 felt dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear it. Like I can certainly hear it more in your tires. That could.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if there's any correlation between hearing and CRR. But
yeah.
I would not want to take lots of corners fast with 13 psi and 48.
No, I wouldn't.
On that set, I felt like lower was worse almost all the time.
Yeah.
Like on the rough stuff we did going downhill, lower kept feeling better and better.
Yep.
But when you pedal, it felt bad. Here, it just kind of felt bad the whole time.
Yeah, I think we kind of started, the highest pressure was a little low for the pavement.
For pavement, yeah.
So, yeah, got worse and worse, but we'll go plug it into Golden Cheetah and see how it was.
What I love dorking out about bikes is many things, but one thing is that no matter how accurate you think you are, at some point you know you're going to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So trying to pick the best pressure for a course that has the chunkiest of the chunk and super smooth pavement, at some point you're going to be on the wrong pressure.
Yeah.
But it's fun to play with the far ends of it and try to figure out like where the sweet spot is and then download from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the big one we get all the time is how do you choose a pressure? And if you're Keegan or Lexi trying to win the race, you're probably looking at where the race is going to be won. But if you're me, it's just what I'm going to be spending the most time on. So probably on the chunkier side and not the 4 miles of pavement that I think we got.
So if you want to dig into the Chung Method, I'll put a link to a video Travis and Dr. Chung himself did on how to do that down below. But one thing I would encourage you to do is use a tire pressure calculator like Silca's. I'll also put a link to that down below. And just try it yourself. Try the high pressure, try the low pressure on one stretch, and you can just sort of get a feel for what works for you. And we're back. Back in our respective offices. Travis, good to see you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Ben?
Doing all right. So what were the takeaways? I mean, let's get to the numbers of like you've done the number crunching, you've done the mathematics with the Chung Method in Golden Cheetah. What did the numbers say as far as our runs on the Divide Road and then our downtown criterium testing on the pavement there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting. I know I made a comment to you kind of off screen when we were setting up the bikes that whatever the CRR number that comes out of this is going to be so bad because as soon as I stepped onto the road, my mountain bike shoes clogged.
Yeah.
It was just so soft and the surface was deforming and it was sandy, rocky, muddy. Like it was gross. Um, and kind of as we saw, the lower the pressure went, the faster we got. Um, the category one gravel, I think most people would agree that
Now
it's
we're
probably
talking
not the best.
we're talking about the Divide now, just to be clear. Like we
Yes,
did the
yes.
two-hour testing
We
of
did
those.
Divide Road and
And Divide Road we picked because that is such a chunky, gnarly section. Once we got
yeah.
out there, the chunkiest part was literally underwater, right? Yeah, we'd spend more time walking and cleaning our bikes than we would riding. So
Mhm.
we rode on the relatively driest stretch. That's what we're talking about here
Yeah.
is that section
Yeah.
of the Divide
So
Road.
for a little more context for everybody, the rain had happened, they had gotten pretty gnarly thunderstorms and rain the like week leading up to it. So it was about as saturated as it could be. And I think 2 days before there was another big rainstorm, and we saw some videos coming out that some of those same sections of road near Divide were totally unrideable for basically the entire stretch. By the time we
Mhm.
got out there, it was a little bit of a like, I don't know what we're going to find when we get there, but
Yeah.
we found a stretch. I think it was, I want to say it was like a mile and change each direction. Um, Maybe not quite that far, but
Not
maybe
quite
a
that far.
mile. I think it was a mile and a half round trip, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that section was really soft, and I think the word that we'll end up coming back to is it was a deformable surface, right? It would move under the tire.
Uh,
Um,
it's like my stomach. It's a
yeah,
deformable surface. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really as we tested the pressures we used the Silca tire pressure calculator, and we started at category one gravel, which I think is probably too high of a pressure. Um, Then we went to cobblestone, which is probably a little closer, and then category four gravel, which is the lowest the Silca tire pressure calculator went. And then, really the goal, we went what we called stupid low, was another step function down below. For my setup, it actually ended up working out nicely that it was 3 psi drop every time.
Hmm.
Um, and then the idea of that is that you expect to see this curve of it's getting faster and faster, you're going to hit this break point, that's what the calculator is looking for, and then it's going to
Hmm.
get slower again.
It's gonna get worse.
um
Yeah.
yeah, and really what we saw is going from the category one gravel to cobblestone, there was a 12-watt gain in rolling resistance. So that's enormous, just to kind of show the impact of like
Yeah.
going a little too high can be really bad. That kind of stacks up to what what we've seen, what we've tested in other scenarios, whether that's at Roubaix or a super smooth time trial course, it's exponentially bad if you're over the ideal pressure. Um,
Because
then
you are
as we
bouncing,
dropped,
you and your bike are bouncing around. It's not just a
yeah,
negative feeling of being rattled, but like the whole machine is being made more inefficient because it's going upwards and sometimes even backwards instead of the
yeah.
force continuing forward in a smooth fashion.
The way that I really like to think about that, the kind of mental model I use is that every one of those little imperfections is elevation.
Mm.
Um, and if you're on a perfectly hard tire, your entire system, like I probably train too little and eat too much. So these days it's even worse. But every pound of that system is going up and down and up and down.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And as you're getting to a more optimal pressure, you're letting the tire do that. And if you have call it a 10 mil uh, bump in the road, at super hard pressure, that entire 200 something pounds of system is going up
Right.
and down 10 mil.
You're
But if
you're
you,
climbing a gajillion tiny hills over and over and over.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
but if you get that optimal pressure, maybe your whole system only has to go up 2 mil because the tire is going to take the rest of that, or, whatever that works
Hmm.
out to.
Yeah, another way I
Um,
think people could relate to is like being in a vehicle on washboardy gravel roads. Like if you're
mhm,
just like coasting up to a stop sign and it's perfectly smooth, you will coast further than if the whole system's shaking like and you're getting brake
exactly.
bumps. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think,
So like,
bringing it
and I
out to the
think
extremes is helpful.
yeah, and I think you and I both had that basic understanding going into this is that,
Hmm.
yeah, too high, bad. Feels bad and is slower. And we'll get, the lower the pressure goes, the better it feels and the smoother it will be and the faster it will be. But then at some point, we're going to get squishy and
Yeah.
then we're going to be just dragging rubber and that will add drag. But that didn't happen. There was no bottom. And it seemed
It,
like it
it
was
sort
because,
of did. It sort of did. As we got closer to the bottom, you see it start the gains really slowed.
yes, yes,
Which kind of tells me we were getting right to that break point. I don't know, it would take
yeah,
more runs to figure out if we were a little below or a little above to figure out where that break point went.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it did get faster as we as we
yeah.
went down.
And for me, that made me think of like cyclocross muddy conditions
Hmm.
where racers will just use absurdly low pressures where either just like the tire, like often tubers just be flopping around on the rim almost.
Yeah.
But that at that they're not compromising speed and they're getting grip. So that's was that kind of far
Yeah,
end
that
use
goes
case.
back to, that sloppy mud is a deformable surface, right? It's as you're, especially I think of couple bad flashbacks to some cross races, but you get that muddy off camber, you're coming down the hill and back up, and that mud is moving underneath you.
Yeah,
Like, so really, it's the same way with like, if you go through the sand pit, like there is no tire performance that's as bad as the sand is a surface.
right, right.
Um, I ended up calling Josh to get some more help after the test of like, hey, make sure I'm understanding this right.
Right. Yes.
And he talked about if you saw that for a prolonged period of time, like you might actually be there is a scenario where you'd be faster putting an insert in and intentionally riding the insert for a prolonged period of time because that's going to be more efficient than whatever that surface is. Um,
Yes.
Now you're never gonna see that for probably long enough in an actual event to do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
But for
Yeah.
that particular section, if you had
Yes.
one of the Grava systems or something like that, you
Yes.
pump that tire pressure down as low as you could possibly get without breaking a rim.
And that dovetails nicely with the other end of the spectrum of our test, which we went to pavement. And just
Hmm.
like in a gravel race, unless things have gone horribly wrong, you're not going to be in mud, sand, bog for 200 miles.
Yeah.
There'll be some of that. You're probably not going to be on pavement in a gravel race for 200 miles,
Hmm.
but you might hit both ends of the spectrum and a whole lot in between,
Hmm.
which leads to the consternation that many of us have and enjoy having. Like, we can only set one thing. Like, what do we set? It's like, what Burke Swindlehurst used to say about the race that he created, Crusher and the Tusher. Whichever bike you pick, at some point, it will be the wrong one. Like
Yeah.
parts of that course you'd want to be on a full suspension mountain bike, parts you want to be on a road bike, but you can only pick one. You can only pick one tire pressure, which is why we went and looked at the Eskridge pavement. It was funny riding around there. Alexei Vermeulen and his videographer and buddy Avery Sturm were there. Like, what are you guys doing? We're like, we're tire pressure testing. They're like, right, but why on pavement? It's like, well, because that is the other end of the
Yeah.
spectrum. So, without further ado, what did the tire testing tell us on the pavement in Eskridge?
Yes, we tested the same pressures, right? Category 1 gravel, cobblestone, category 4, and stupid low. In hindsight, we should have tested like, some pavement pressures to see where it was
Tested
fastest
higher.
because we were
Yeah.
already at
We were already too
we
low.
were already at a suboptimal pressure, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and that graph should have gotten slower and slower as we dropped the pressure, and it did. So I think, really that served for me, it served as a sanity check when the Divide Road results didn't come out maybe the way I expected them to, at least not exactly.
Hmm.
Um, that we can go, we did that test. We left Divide Road, and that's a mile from where we were testing. So uh, the conditions didn't change. It wasn't like we forgot how to ride in the same position. We
Hmm.
didn't go eat lunch in between and gain 10 pounds. Um, there wasn't any craziness like that, and it was, in my mind, that was a really good sanity check to make sure that those other results that we were seeing on Divide Road made sense.
That feels faster, but feelings can lie. Feelings are liars. So Travis, let me ask you what your takeaways are, both for yourself, like what your takeaways are for how you set up your bike with those tires, and then what your general advice is for people like myself who are asking you, Travis, how do I set up my bike here?
I think to default to I don't know if it's Silca or Josh's, canned line of it depends, right? Um,
Yeah.
I think what that told us is that the testing is so important. Um, because in the calculator, I think we have 7 or 8 surfaces, something like that. Um, I think we all know there's probably more than 7 or 8 surface conditions on that one course. Um, they're probably fairly similar, and most of them are probably contained within that tire pressure calculator. Um, but there's going to be some outliers, and you really need to figure out what you're optimizing for. We get this question at a booth, and if you ever see us at an expo, come up and ask. Always love having that discussion. But what's your goal? I talk with Alexei Vermeulen about this a lot before races, and that discussion is generally based around where he thinks the race is going to be won. If
Hmm.
the winning move at Unbound is going to go on Little Egypt, and that's where you want every watt to matter, then
Hmm.
you're probably optimizing for some of the worst conditions out there. Um, if if you think if he thinks that you know uh, there's going to be a 10-person group going into the University Hill, which is for those aren't familiar with the course, there's a little paved kicker the last mile of the course, mile and a half, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, that when a big group comes in, that's usually the last place to put in a dig before a sprint.
Hmm.
But I think we saw Brendan Wirtz last year at Nationals win in a sprint on the pavement in what I think most people would consider a pretty suboptimal setup for basically the rest of the course. Um, but he had some serious advantages on that in that sprint. So if you're at the pointy end of the race trying to win, it's a um, totally different calculation than if you're me, right? I rode the 100 with a buddy. We were trying to have a good time. I just wanted it to suck the least. If you're in that boat, then like probably
Yeah.
whatever the most common, I think Unbound is kind of a unique event, especially if you're in the 200, where it gets a big reputation for being the gnarliest, roughest, most awful gravel. In reality, I don't think it's that way. For 95% of the course,
Yeah.
there's some really nasty, awful sections, don't get me wrong. Um, but there's also some really nice gravel out there. It's a good chunk of the day is not bad. Um, and for me, I'm probably going to try to optimize for that with keeping in mind um, that those gnarly sections exist, and I don't want to break a wheel or something and really ruin my day. So I'm going to ignore the pavement entirely. I'm not winning anything, so that little hill, I'm just trying not to cramp when I'm coming home. So it really depends on what you're trying to get out of that ride and what you're optimizing for, and that's going to be, that's going to run the gambit of kind of the same as the talent level, right? Like,
Sure.
you know, whatever you're looking to do, that's kind of where you want to look to optimize.
Sure. One of my takeaways is that people should have a two-step process if they're concerned about this. One is use a calculator to
Mhm.
set a pressure, pay attention to what that is, and go take some runs on a stretch of course, whether that's a race course or just like what you like to ride at home, and notice how that feels, and maybe pay attention to some of the speed, and then change the pressure, maybe drastically at first, and again, like ride that section and see how it feels, see what the speed difference is. And I think that's where the dialing in part comes, and you can go as deep as you want using Chung Method on Golden Cheetah, or some that can just be sort of gut feel. But the tire pressure calculator is an excellent resource as a great place to start, because there's so many variables that are changing constantly now with
Mhm.
tire width and tire casing and inner rim width, and there's so many variables. It's hard to know where to start. So I think the tire calculator remains a great resource. This is a great place to start, where you can get in the ballpark
Mhm.
and then adjust and see how it goes.
Yeah, I think the other piece that kind of popped into my head is I would always, trying to think of a scenario where maybe always wouldn't apply, but I think that's probably fair. I would always err on the side of too little pressure
Mm.
uh, than too much. I
Uh-huh.
think, I don't know if we got into it, but it was a 12-watt gain in the first drop, a 10-watt gain in the second drop, and then from category 4 to stupid low, it was only 2 watts. And that really just shows the nonlinearity of, we were getting close. So if you're in that ballpark, um, going a few psi too high, like if category 4 was optimal, call it, we're talking about a 2-watt change versus a
Mm.
10-watt change, and that's common across a lot of different surfaces. Maybe not to that extreme, but um, that kind of multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's going to be a little bit more comfortable. So if you look at, I think I ended up writing up a blog post and did some, we'll call it rough math of if you ran that poor of tire pressure all day,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's something like, I want to say over the 200, it was like 30 minutes of time difference.
That's
And,
enormous.
you
Yeah.
know, if you're in my position, right? Like I had this conversation with a friend last year around aero bars. He's like, "What do you care? You're not trying to win. You're not trying to get any particular time. What do you care if it's 30 minutes longer?" It's like,
Trying
well,
to beat the sun, man. That's 30 minutes less.
my argument was even simpler. It's like, that's 16, 17 miles out into out from the finish, the end of a 200-mile day. You're telling me if at 16 miles to go, somebody walked up to you and said, "You could be done right now," you wouldn't take it? Like, I, I'm not trying to race the thing, but I don't want to be out here any longer than I need to. It's long enough. So, really paying attention to those little details, when I put it into that context, for me, like, I'll take any time saving I can get.
Sure, sure. For me, what's too low, in addition to what the tire calculator says, is if the tires start to feel super squirmy, like it's going to roll on me
Mhm.
in a corner. But that you've got to get well beneath like the recommended pressures to get to that point. So,
Yeah, and that all goes back to, just because it's the optimal for that particular, we're calculating the optimal spring rate, not what's going to keep you upright, not
right.
what's safe for the wheel. Sometimes there's pressures that are higher than you can safely run on the wheel. with all the hookless stuff going on now, not so much in gravel, but
Yeah, for road
yeah,
pressures, perhaps. Yeah, yeah,
you know, if you go so low that you break your rim, standing on the side of the road sure isn't fast either. So, or you know, picking gravel out of your hip when you're sliding across the ground,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
something that you can keep upright is most important.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been super fun. Thanks for
Yeah,
indulging me in tire testing out there in Kansas and now back in the Silca lab. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks for
And
coming out, and it was a lot of fun.
yeah, and viewers, I'll put links to Travis's blog below, as well as links to the tire pressure calculator, which you should absolutely check out if you haven't already, and also Travis's video with Dr. Chung, who created the Chung Method, so you can check that all out. So, bottom line, as always, enjoy your ride, and having the right tire pressure can help you do that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.